So now we will discuss about a very important topic, successful aging. Of course, another way to name this topic would be Rasayana or Jara Chikitsa, but I want to use a more relevant term, and a term that is more relevant in our contemporary times. What is successful aging and what would be the Ayurvedic perspectives? At the outset, I want to bring attention to the fact that there is a philosophical, perspective from which we must look at aging. Today, modern research on aging is all about finding out how long cells can survive, how long the physical body can survive. But in ancient times, the focus, this was considered to be a very Asuric engagement. In our tradition, it was the Asuras who actually wanted to live for long and, never die. This was not the engagement of, people with a more human disposition. So I want to put this disclaimer and warning before we get into the topic of successful aging, because we can see it was all the Asuras who did the tapas and their goal was to not die at all. And then it becomes even difficult for the gods to destroy such monstrous individuals. So I am very, very concerned when we look at modern research and the way it is focusing only on biomolecular cellular mechanisms of aging. Are we going to create, dangerous asuras in the future? Today, it's a matter of relief for us to know that even the most monstrous individuals will eventually die. So that is a matter of solace and consolation when we are not able to handle such people. Ultimately, we can say there will be a time when they will die and we will be relieved of their burden. But if we become really successful in developing anti-aging solutions, and if it is applied with this Asuric spirit, then this world is going to be a really, really difficult place to live. That is why I want to choose the title of my topic as successful aging. I mean, we are not really talking about, eternal life. It would be good to die. We should see if childbirth is like sunrise, which is so beautiful, so energetic, death is like sunset. And we should be able to create a sunset in our lives. Today it is not a sunset. It is like an eclipse or a sudden burst of clouds coming and, just extinguishing the fire of life once and all forever. But we could lead a life of fullness and then pass away just as majestically as the sun is setting in the horizon. So the whole focus here is in Ayurveda. That is why we never talked about, we only wanted a reasonable extension of our lifespan. In fact, not even an excess lifespan, but a complete lifespan. So we talk about Kala Mrityu and Akala Mrityu. The goal of Ayurveda is Kala Mrityu, let us die. That is what the Mrityunjaya mantra also is, actually a mantra which is not against death. When we say Mrityunjaya, we get a feeling as if we are going to live forever. But Mrityunjaya mantra says, Om Triyambagam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam 𝘈𝘀𝘆𝑒 bandhanad mrityormukshyam amritad, which means that just like the urvaru fruit, which when it's fully ripe, just, breaks off from the vine. Let me die like that. So it is actually a prayer for a majestic death of a life that has been completely fulfilled. So when I come to aging in Ayurveda, this is a point that we really need to make. And even in the Vedas, they were not very ambitious. They said, in Ayurveda we say, Shatayurvai Purushaha, and Jivema Sharadaschatam, Pashyema Sharadaschatam. So they were not over ambitious. What is the use of living 1,000 years? This is my question. Today they say that it is even possible technically, if we were able to achieve some biomolecular breakthroughs, we might even be able to live for 1,000 years. But is that necessary to burden the earth with so many years of our miserable existence? Is it not better to live for a shorter time and contribute more and then live, leaving memories of a life that people will cherish? So I want to point out, I'm just tempted to tell a little bit of philosophy before we go into the biology of aging. I want also to recall a very interesting story in the Puranas of Markandeya Purana. This is the story of Markanda. And this is very interesting before we look at aging, because this is about a young Brahmin couple who did not have any children, and they pray to Lord Shiva. And I am also remembering Kashi Vishwanatha here because he is the focus of the story. And after a lot of austerities, Shiva appears before them, and he says, I will grant you the boon of a child, but you have to make a choice. Do you want a child that is very intelligent but short-lived, or do you want a dullard who will live for long? And now the couple are a bit puzzled, but finally they decide that they will have a child who lives only for a short period. Now, if you want them, the purpose of life is to expand our consciousness and be productive and contribute to society before we pass away. This is called as brahmacharya in Ayurveda. It's not just celibacy. Brahmacharya means 𝘔𝑗𝑗, to expand your mind. So life achieves its purpose only if it fulfills this higher goal of self-evolution. And we need just enough time to complete the self-evolution, because the process of life is that from our physical body, we expand our consciousness and merge with the whole cosmos, because we have come. This is what the Srishti Shariram and Garbha Shariram in Ayurveda points out to us. From the Srishti, from the cosmos, we have emerged as a microcosm. And now, trapped in that microcosmic shell is this universal consciousness which is trying to break apart and merge back into the macrocosm. And we need a little time for that to happen. We need help to be able to achieve this. And this is the goal of anti-aging remedies. It's not just simply to live on forever with a body that will not die. So this is the first and foremost point. So I'm going to talk here about what is successful aging. A few more stories from the Puranas before we get into the topic. Recently I was reading about the possible age of the Pandavas when they were engaged in the Mahabharata war. I was surprised at the estimates, because the highest estimate, which looks to be quite unreasonable, was 90s. That the Pandavas were in their 90s when they waged the Mahabharata. And definitely it does look like Bhishmacharya was quite aged when he so skillfully waged the war. So to be physically fit at that age is quite amazing. It's even amazing to conceive, that people could be actively in military at that age. But lower estimate was around also quite high in the 60s. It's an age when all our military personnel would have already retired and would be, taking their peg of liquor at home comfortably, and they won't be in the battlefield. So the Pandavas were active at very advanced age. So physically active, the reflexes were all so strong. So this is what we mean by successful aging. This is what Ayurveda says, that we can minimize the impact of aging on life, although we cannot prevent death. And we can discard our body rather than dying. So this was a very important goal that was kept in the old traditions, that you have to discard your body. There was no death. So even all the sannyasis, when they say they have done dehatyaga, and the Raghuvamsha Kalidasa says, yoge nande tanutyajam. So I am happy, satisfied, and I am willing to die. I'm just willing to give up my body. That was how death was, looked at. Today death is, we don't know, we don't understand death. Even modern medicine thinks that death is a failure of the system. And this is preventing people from even dying peacefully. When I was young, there were many elders in my family. I still remember when we go for vacation, they used to call and say, come, let me bless you, because the next festival I will not be there. And then we come to hear some months later that they have passed away. So they knew that they are going to die. So this is definitely a possibility that, we can smile at death. I am reminded also of a poem, lines of a poem, looking at death in a completely different way. "O death," she says, "where are thy stings that the seers have seen in thee? I see death now with the gentleness of a mother coming and slowly, putting the child to sleep. So death can have a motherly presence if we live a life to complete fullness. The passing away of a person from this world can be a meditative experience. So we have this tradition of celebrating death in Tamil Nadu. Quite intriguing to watch, when young children dancing and playing the drums as the dead body of the person is taken for cremation. Of course, today we don't understand the inner significance. It was celebration of 𝐴𝐿 of a life that was completely fulfilled. It was an acceptance of that death, a cultural acceptance that this is a person who has led a life of completeness and that there's no point. We have to actually celebrate that person's existence. And I have also experienced when my father passed away, I felt that it was a very meditative atmosphere. That passing away of a life into, the other world does really make you feel very profound inside. So it depends on how death happens. And this 𝐴𝐿 is the goal of Rasayana therapy. In fact, Rasayana is not just it's definitely not for immortality, because Charaka Samhita says, na kevalam 𝘉𝘁𝑚 𝐼𝑢𝑟. That is why I think in Charaka Samhita it's very clear, the first chapter says 𝘉𝑗𝑖𝑣𝑡𝑎𝑚, not 𝑠∫∫∫ jivitam. They never even put that as a goal. Only a long life. Na kevalam 𝘉𝑗 𝑚 rasayanam yo vidhivan nishevate gatimsa devarshi nishevitam shubham prapadyade brahma tathedi chakshay. So the purpose of Rasayana is not just to make you live long. It is to create the quality of your tissues, the transformation, a physical transformation that actually kickstarts your spiritual evolution and enables you to achieve a very high level of consciousness. Now this is, I think, the big difference between anti-aging remedies in Ayurveda and in modern medicine. In modern medicine, we are only looking at the survival of the physical body. It's almost like making your body into a cancerous organism which knows how to self-propagate, but there is no inner transformation of the psycho-spiritual aspects of the individual. Whereas the whole focus of Rasayana in Ayurveda is on that higher development. Do we have enough time to evolve and elevate our consciousness? And this is the reason why, āCāRA Rasayana also becomes of utmost importance in the concept of aging. Satyavadinam, akrodham, adhyatma pravanendriyam, and all those concepts. So it's been quite a long introduction, a little bit of philosophy, but I think this puts things in perspective. Especially today, I see many of our Ayurveda colleagues doing tests on, herbs, whether it is preserving the telomere length or whether it is, repairing DNA damage. These are all interesting, but Ayurveda is not just, these biomolecular mechanisms, and this is what I want to open up in our discussion today. So the aging is the impact of time on life. It's actually aging means, the loss of ability to renew. We are dying moment by moment. Every day we are recreating ourselves. So aging means that we are beginning to lose the ability to recreate ourselves. So that is the whole concept in Ayurveda, is that we enable the body to preserve itself, preserve its robustness, and so that even when the process of disintegration takes over, you are able to preserve a basic functionality of both the physical body as well as the mind. So after a certain stage, the body cannot renew itself. But if you have preserved the quality of your tissues to a certain level at that point, then the disintegration process will not be as destructive. It will not compromise all your functionalities. Although there will be some loss of functionality, the essential faculties can be preserved if you can do this process of maintenance and preservance before you get into old age. So Ayurveda clearly says, 𝑝ūrve vayasi madhyeva, that is when Rasayana has to be done. It's a preparation for old age, because in old age, renewal is not as robust or even possible at a certain stage. Now, the first and foremost thing that we need to understand is that we must first of all accept and celebrate old age. We fail in our process of aging the moment we reject aging, or we fail to accept aging as a natural consequence of life. We don't prepare to age, because when we age, we feel we have failed. It gives you a feeling of, my God, I have become aged. Now, this is the first step in Rasayana therapy. And I want to bring your attention to a group of people, the Abkhazia community. They compliment each other by telling, you're looking old today. In that culture, this is the best compliment you can give to another person. Even children say, I have become old. Because they have kept aging as a goal in their life. Aging means successful aging. So if they have aged, it means that they have crossed the major challenges and hurdles in life, and they have reached the end point of their life. It means that it is a life that they have lived successfully. They have survived to old age, and they are also thriving in old age. So when older people lie about their age, they do not give a younger age. In our society, we always want to reduce our age by a few years. If somebody asks, how old are you? At least 5 years younger, if we say, or if somebody tells you you're looking 10 years younger than your age, we are all very happy. But in this society, people want to exaggerate their ages. They always tell, I'm 100 years old. So this actually changes their attitude towards old age and makes them prepare for a better aging. Today we are all hunting for old age shelters. All our parents and older generation, we are throwing into these old age shelters. Because we consider old age as a failure. They have to be taken, they are what you call as, in a diplomatic way, specially able people or whatever it is. But it is nothing. This is a complete failure of our culture to understand and how to deal with aging. In our tradition, the old people were the shelter for the world. They were the most respected. Old age was the most respected stage of your life. The Vriddhas, that is a stage where you went into Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. And these are the people who later guided the whole of society. They did not need to be taken care of. They were the shelter for the world. We have to really bring back this culture. And this is where I think Ayurveda can play a big role in bringing a big shift in perception. Now I want to put in contrast. Which approach do we want to take? If you want to really become young, you could also become a vampire. You can drink young blood. If it's difficult to drink young blood, you can just transfuse yourself with the blood of young people, and such experiments are going on. And so it appears that there is some scientific credibility to a vampiric way of life. So it's happening in the town of Monterrey, people have paid $8,000 to participate in a controversial trial of blood plasma from donors aged 16 to 25, with the hope that they can turn back the clock. So there is also some credibility. This young blood is giving, it is bringing about changes. In 1615, as early as 1615, these experiments were conducted. A German doctor connected the arteries of an older man to that of a young man to, bring a flesh blood flow of young blood into the old person. And interestingly, it appears that this idea has promise. They did on old mice became healthier with young blood, whilst young mice became sick with blood from elderly mice. So there are, of course, risks associated. It looks really a very devilish way of trying to be young. So this is on one extreme. And on the other extreme, is the concept that if you can just be happy, if you can have a higher meaning in life, then also you can bring about, a big change in the way you age. So that is a question here. There was a study in the United States which looked at two groups of people based on what is their philosophy, hedonism and eudaimonism. Hedonistic people live a very selfish life. They are just looking at their own target, survival oriented. Eudaimonistic people are the ones who have a broader vision in life. They want to strive for a higher goal. And they looked at the upregulation and downregulation of pro-inflammatory genes in these two groups of people. And they found that people with a eudaimonistic approach in life, their pro-inflammatory genes were downregulated, whereas in the hedonistic people that was upregulated. So this is the question that I want to put, the dilemma before us. Do we want to choose the vampiric way of being young or the angelic way of choosing a life of eudaimonism? And also both give you promises that you can stay young and be robust. And Ayurveda definitely has chosen the path, the 𝘍𝑒𝑣𝑒, as we say, the angelic way of combating aging. And that is what I want to discuss here today. Let's look at many modern mechanisms of aging, and then we will try to come back to Ayurveda. The body has, over a period of time, cells become old, because we know that cells are having a cycle, and after a point of time they lose the ability to divide and renew themselves. They become irreparably damaged. And now there are researches which are showing that if you can just purge the body of these retired cells, if you can just remove these older senescent cells, then you can have a fresh lease of life. So it's quite a lot of possibility. I mean, what has happened in the last few decades is that although we have not reached anywhere near really, so that is one warning I want to give our Ayurvedic community also. We are using biomedical models and saying we have proved that this is effective. See, in modern medicine itself, there is nothing that has been proven as really effective or a solution for aging. They would only say that we have begun to understand some of the mechanisms in aging. We know that through some preclinical and animal studies, it could be possible to influence the process of aging, but it is far from definite proof. So using those models, we work on fruit flies and such other things, and if we get some results, it doesn't mean that we have proved anything. So it should be taken with a pinch of salt. Now, but it's interesting now that we know a lot of mechanisms that are involved in aging. One is purging the body of retired cells. So there are experiments which have shown that mice that have their senescent cells removed live longer. So there is this FOXO4-DRI, which is a compound that interferes the normal process that would tell the cell to stop dividing. So these mouse are now 30 months old, which is approximately the equivalent of 100 human years, and remain active, proving that the effect is not temporary. So in animal models, by interfering, by removing the cells that are senescent, it is possible to extend the life. So how long can we give? I'm coming back to this question. There is documented evidence of a person called 𝐻𝐵 from France who lived for 122 years. So since healthcare has continually improved at that time, it's surprising that this record is not being surpassed. So that is why I say nature intends that we have a limited life. Now, what is need to improve is not just the lifespan but also the health span. I was reading the 𝐻𝐿 Samhita some years ago, looking at the method of dissection, and suddenly I got struck by one statement in the 𝐻𝐿 Samhita, which says when you choose a dead body for dissection, it should be 𝑎varsha-shatikam. It should not be older than 100 years. Now that immediately set me thinking. Now we would never write, don't take a body which is more than 100 years old, because very, very unlikely that we will get a body that is 100 years old. If 𝐻𝐿 had to write that don't take a body which is more than 100 years old, it means that it was very difficult to find bodies of people who died at a younger age. So that is, if at all, an indication, or it could be a very idealistic way of putting it. But I don't know. 𝐻𝐿 was a very practical person. He wouldn't put the criteria which had no practical relevance. He was much more practical approach than the approach that we see in Charaka. So it does appear that at that time people were able to lead a full life of 100 years. In fact, there are also papers which say that, studies which say that we are genetically predisposed to die once we reach a certain age, and that 120 years would be the maximum that we can stretch. But there are others who think differently. There is a person called 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝑗. He's a professor at Sense Foundation. He believes that human lifespan could extend dramatically to 1000. And we can also see such ideas in Ayurveda, 𝘕𝑚𝑒 and things like that. But this is where I want to ask the point, and my focus here is not on really extending lives, as they say, not adding years to life, but adding life to years. Modern science has not really fully understood the mechanism of aging. So when we try to prove Ayurveda based on modern findings, we must be very, very cautious. That most of the time when I have looked at modern papers and Ayurveda papers on aging, I found there is greater confidence in the Ayurvedic community in having proved something that was already there, where modern researchers are very cautious and they don't make such big, powerful claims. Laboratory experiments have shown that it is possible to influence aging, but we don't know whether these can still be translated into human life in a very effective way. Now, one of the simplest ways in which we can influence aging is caloric restriction. Reducing diet intake to less than 30 to 50% has shown to improve lifespan in animals. If you can just reduce the intake of food, you will live longer. It's very simple. Now, I want to talk about simple things that were a good part of our culture to prevent aging. I mean, fasting was such a common feature in almost all cultures. And we think it's not just for, one of the things that fasting does is that it helps you to purge out the senescent cells of your body. This is called autophagy, and it was a Nobel Prize winning discovery of scientists from Japan made this discovery of autophagy. And if you are able to fast continuously for 1 or 2 days, your whole immune system is renewed. So, but this is still, we have to take all these things with a pinch of salt. It may not be correct to generalize it. While in animals this has consistently shown good results, in humans, fasting has also sometimes shown to have detrimental effects. I think this is because the individuals are different. The nutritional requirements and needs may be different from individual to individuals. So this idea of caloric restriction and aging, while it looks very promising in animals, in humans it needs to be more thoroughly studied. What do you mean by fasting? And I want to bring our attention again to the Mahabharata. This is interesting because many of these medical concepts were made popular in those times. So you find them not in Ayurvedic books, but in many other non-Ayurvedic texts. So Mahabharata, there is a question, Katham sadobhavasi syad? How can I become a man who is always fasting? So obviously we think if you don't eat at all, then you are a person who is constantly fasting. But that's not the case here. Mahabharata says that if you do not eat between 2 meals in a day, if you eat only twice a day, and if you do not eat in between, then you are a sadopavasi, which means you don't need to do any more fasting. It is said that the Buddha also went through extreme, rigorous asceticism, and he finally concluded that such kind of torturing of the body is of no use. It will not help us. The Bhagavad Gita also says that yuktahara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya. So, yukta swapnava bodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. So, sleep, activity, food, all these are required in balance. So, so therefore I think in Ayurveda we have taken a very balanced approach. It is not just, blind avoidance of food, but balancing the nutrition which actually helps in aging, in controlling the process of aging. So there are many, many herbs and formulations which are being claimed to have benefit in aging. For example, walnuts, they are extolled for their powerful effect in preserving the brain function and even in preventing aging. But we don't really have yet a very established clinically usable intervention based on this knowledge. Most of the time it is not there. Resveratrol, which is a chemical found in grapes, is being extolled for its anti-aging effects. But people are using grapes since a long time. We are still not able to discern just with resveratrol or walnuts that we are getting dramatic effects in our aging. So it means that these are all only bits and pieces. They don't really give you the complete idea of what aging is. And I'm sure that it is going to be almost impossible to find one chemical or one mechanism which will be the solution to this problem of aging. We need to have a multi-pronged approach. And that is why to date, really speaking, if you ask, has mankind discovered an anti-aging remedy? Modern science would say no, definitely no. So they would only say that now we understand better the mechanisms of aging. Now what would be the answer in Ayurveda? I think Ayurveda has never made any big claims that it can prevent death or even it has always told that much more than medicines and such interventions, it is the lifestyle and the mindset of the individual which is going to determine whether you age successfully or not. And that is one thing which I want to focus more here. I want to just shift our attention from biomolecular mechanisms to things that are deeper and more subtle. Before that, we will examine what are the modern theories of aging. So some of those theories I am listing here: the telomere theory, the DNA theory, the waste accumulation theory, the reproductive hormone theory, free radical theory. So these are some of the models with which modern science is beginning to understand how and why aging is happening. And here we can also see some Ayurvedic parallels and Ayurvedic interventions producing some change in these mechanisms. So the free radical theory was proposed in 2003. Then we have the immunologic theory, even more if you go into detail. The inflammation theory, the mitochondrial theory. These are all very specific focuses on particular mechanisms in aging. And but we need to have a global view. We still do not fully understand this. And right now the consensus seems to be that the previously researchers were really trying to focus and find one single cause for aging. Now they have come out of that fixation. Now they say that aging is an extremely complex multifactorial process. And in fact, it seems to be that it's an orchestration, very complex orchestration and interplay of multiple factors that actually determine aging. And which is why if we just focus on one herb or one mechanism, even Ayurveda will not actually be able to create a real dent on this process of aging. The Ministry of Ayush has highlighted some of the studies that have happened with anti-aging herbs in Ayurveda. And this is really good that we are doing such studies, but before we actually bring it into a translated effective intervention, we must really give thought and rethink on the complete approach that Ayurveda has advocated to combat aging. So we should not consider any of these theories as mutually exclusive. So all of them work together, and they are complementary, and they all explain one or other feature of the aging process. Now there is this evolutionary theory of aging. Darwin explained that a natural selection occurs in organisms dying primarily from predation and environmental hazards, and then they will optimize their adaptation mechanism so they can survive. And this is how the species learn to survive longer, through the process of survival and adaptation. So there is evidence that animals living in a protected environment live longer, potentially reaching their maximum lifespans. So this mainland opossums that are subject to predation to a population of opossums living on an island free of predators, they compared and they found that this enhances survival when they are not in that hostile environment. So the evolutionary theory predicts that the protected island opossums would have had the opportunity to evolve a longer lifespan if beneficial to their fitness. So island opossums did live longer and aged more slowly than their mainland counterparts, because there, because of the threat of dying early, the whole process of evolution is much faster. So just because there was not that threat of, predators, the animals living in a more safer pace, their biological systems slowed down and they were able to live much longer. So this is also very different in different life forms. And this is something which also brings us to philosophy. There is this somatic organism idea, the disposable soma theory of aging, which may be true in lower life forms, that once reproduction is achieved, there is no need of that body to survive. So the body is destroyed after reproduction. So in many lower life forms, the whole purpose of life is only up to the point that the organism reproduces. And once it's reproduced, it doesn't have to live anymore. But in human life, it is not. Because the full life is for psycho-spiritual evolution. As you saw the this is the reason why studies only in lower life forms may not be translatable into humans, because the whole mechanism of aging and combating that in lower life forms, where the purpose of those living forms and the way they propagated themselves very different from humans. So we will eventually need to do human-only studies to understand our own peculiarities. The free radical theory, it was formulated in the 50s, that talked about the accumulation of endogenous oxygen radicals. This has also become quite popular within the Ayurvedic circles in explaining ama and all that. And then this theory was revised when mitochondria were identified as responsible for initiation of most of the free radical reactions. So now the theory is that it's not just the free radical damage of the other structures in the body, but it's the damage to the mitochondria by free radicals that is actually determining aging. So the free radical theory was modified. But the increasing age-related oxidative stress does really, contribute to the process of faster aging. That's quite understandable. Now there is the gene regulation theory of aging. This says that senescence is a result of changes occurring in gene expression. So we are still not clear whether all genes show changes in expression with age, and this theory is not yet fully supported with compelling evidence. But in lower life forms, it has been able to demonstrate, that genetic manipulations can induce life extension. So that is in organisms like yeast, fruit flies, nematodes, mice, and all that. But we are still not knowing how the proteins coded by these genes are actually involved in the regulation of longevity. Then we have the telomere theory of aging. This is formulated in 1965. When immortal cells in general have a stable telomere length in the chromosome, we can see the telomeres are much longer. And since then it has been observed that shortening of the telomere is associated with faster aging. And also this is well known that in cancer cells, telomerase is upregulated in 85 to 95% of cancer cells. And this telomere stability is what makes cancer cells kind of immortal. So this is another theory. Then we have the inflammation hypothesis of aging, atherosclerosis, diabetes, dementia. And the inflammation theory explains much of the disabilities and difficulties that people experience when they age. And as we know, the chronic inflammatory mechanisms are more involved in long-term consequences. And then we have the immune theory of aging. Immune system, is the most powerful mechanism that the body has to combat stresses. So the more robust immune system we have, the more we are able to preserve ourselves and also reduce the insult that is inflicted on the body by these stresses. So the immune system is what keeps us stable. So this also contributes to aging. Then we have the neuroendocrine theory of aging. which means that the impaired crosstalk ability between the PNEI axis, the psychoneuroendocrine immunological system, the more robust this crosstalk is, the more we are able to, preserve homeostasis and also arrest the process of aging.